3CR would like to acknowledge the Kulin Nation true owners, caretakers, and of the land that we are broadcasting on today.
Welcome to 3CR's Raising Our Voices. Today we're going to talk about the Having a Say conference, and I think we've got Kevin on the line. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Kevin. How are you going?
Good. Is that James, is that?
Yes, it
is
is.
James,
Yes. Sorry,
James,
Kevin.
Sorry. Very good. Thank you.
Yes, I met you at Having a Say conference in Geelong, actually.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Well, that's a good place to meet.
Yes,
Okay.
I think I met you at the dinner dance, actually.
Geez, I hope I wasn't too sweaty.
No. I think you're at the front desk. I think
In the mosh pit.
in the mosh pit. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's good.
I've got a question for you, Kevin. What is the Having a Say conference?
So it's been going for 21 years now, which is amazing. And it started out 21 years ago with the intent of giving people with intellectual disability a voice and a platform to raise their voice from. First conference was about 250 people. Back then it was called Having a Say in the Country because we wanted to give that opportunity to people in rural areas. But each year it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we came to Geelong and it was so big we couldn't go to any smaller town. So it's stayed in Geelong for the last, I don't know, 11, 12 years maybe. And it now is the biggest conference for people with disability, particularly people with intellectual disability, certainly in Australia, maybe in the world. It's 3 days of intense discussion and intense serious fun. It's pretty awesome.
How many people attended the conference?
So this year there was around 1,300 people, and we had over 100 volunteers and 100 or so presenters with people with disabilities primarily. And for those who don't know, the conference is organised at different levels. It's a valid conference, and at the local level within Geelong, there's a group of around 30 people with disabilities who come together every month. They're having a say local reference committee, and they organise all the social and all the events around the conference.
What are VALID and what do they do?
Okay, so VALID it stands for Victorian Advocacy League for Individuals with Disabilities, and we're a human rights focused organisation. We've been around for 30 or so years, and our mission is to support people with intellectual disability to take their place as equal citizens within the Australian community, and to pursue a human rights framework and agenda. And we're funded by the state government to provide individual advocacy support to people with intellectual disability, adults with intellectual disability, and their families across Victoria. So our core business is individual advocacy, but we also do a range of other sort of related things. We do systemic advocacy, speaking to government and to the community about the issues affecting people. We do a whole range of capacity building and training stuff, teaching people how to be strong self-advocates, teaching families how to support their sons and daughters to be strong self-advocates, and working within the community to open up opportunities for people with disability to participate in mainstream stuff. So we've got about 35 staff currently. That goes up and down according to the whims of funders and all of that. But after 30 years, we sort of feel like we're pretty strong, but need to be a lot stronger to do the job that's out there. Lots of vulnerable people needing support.
James, how was the conference when you attended last week?
It was very good, and I attended last week, and it was great. It was very lots of people to meet up with, and lots of people doing different talks, and yeah. I thought the conference was very good, and because I went last February 2019, I think, and it was good. And I went up with a group, I think.
Yeah. Well, certainly, that's great to hear. And that's what we think too.
There's lots of volunteers to meet up with, and lots of different booths to lots of information with different pamphlets. There was a lot of people giving out pamphlets at the conference, and got to meet up with people that I knew at the conference. Like,
one of the things I like about it too, James, is every year we give awards. The conference gives awards to people, and we valid partners with Reinforce, which is the oldest and strongest self-advocacy group in Australia, really, for people with intellectual disability. And we partner with them to give the Pentland Banfield Award, which is dear to Norrie's heart, I'm sure. And this year that award was given to Sonia, I forget her second name, sorry, but from Tasmania, who is a very strong advocate for the rights of parents who have an intellectual disability. So it's just great to be able to actually honour the efforts of people who are involved in this struggle.
Oh, good, Kevin. I thought the conference was really good, and most of the volunteers did a magnificent job. But I'm certainly congratulating Sonia, who won the Banfield and David and Pentland Award. So my congratulations to her.
Yeah, stunning, wasn't it? Yeah,
it would be. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other great highlight too around that was Robert Martin, who's a self-advocate from New Zealand, who's become very prominent on the national stage with Inclusion International. He's pretty awesome. He's been knighted. He's now Sir Robert Martin, and we have the Robert Martin Annual Award. So now to be able to call that the Sir Robert Martin Award is...
But he's certainly been around for years, that Robert Martin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's just great to have heroes. It's just, this movement deserves heroes. There are people like, Colin Hisco, and Amanda and Janice and Norrie and, just all being able to honour the memory of people like Doug Pentland and David Banfield and that. We can't, this movement's not going to survive if we don't honour our heroes and respect each other, Yeah,
it's good to honour our good patrons from our organisation, like David and Doug. So they were really good friends. I know that to me. David was, in my opinion, he was very close to me as a good friend.
Yep. And I hope you'd be proud to know that his name is living on through that award.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Is there a DVD of the conference?
Yep. Every year we produce a DVD. Takes a little while to put it together, but it's a pretty fantastic record. And I think last year's video went for over 2 hours. You can pick out what's the highlights, the things you want. You can navigate your way through it.
Yeah.
We sort of it captures an awful lot of the conference, and people really do value it. We've got some people who've come to every conference. And they have this video collection, and they look at it throughout the year, and they use it to do fundraising in their local communities to try and get money to sponsor people to come. Like I was up in Mildura last year, and they have this sort of fundraising night to send delegation of self-advocates to the conference. It's and the video is a big part of that. So it's amazing just to see how people have really have latched onto it as an opportunity to celebrate. It's pretty good.
Kevin, can you tell our listeners about Kevin Martin, please?
About Robert Martin.
About Robert Martin, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Sorry.
I don't know Kevin Martin. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Sorry, I do apologise.
Hey, no worries. Robert Martin, well, he's a bloody legend. I first met him 20 years ago, 90 or longer than 20 years. We were at a conference together in The Hague in the Netherlands, and he was this powerful man with intellectual disability from New Zealand who was standing up very strongly at the conference, talking about the need to close institutions around the world. Robert had lived his life, his younger life, in an institution, and as he'll tell you himself, he was known to have a few what they call challenging behaviours. He was challenging the system constantly. He wanted to get out, and he wanted other people to get out. He eventually got out, and he led. Was one of the people who led the marches to close institutions in New Zealand, and he then took that fight onto the international stage, and he visited lots of countries around the world, and he became part of Inclusion International's move to have self-advocates at the table rather than just the service providers within Inclusion International. And over the years we kept bringing Robert out to the conference here because we felt that he was a great leader. We have lots of great local leaders too, but Robert had taken that next level, that step up to that international level. He was appointed, he was the first person with disability to address the United Nations, which was a major achievement. He also got elected, his job now, he was nominated to go on to the United Nations Committee that visits each of countries around the world that sign on to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So Robert is part of a 16-person committee that visits countries and basically investigates whether they are living up to the UNCRPD, and then writes a report to governments telling them where they're failing or succeeding. And that's a really important role that Robert, that was the reason he wasn't at the conference last week, that he was off performing that role. So it's an incredibly important role, and as I said, he was recognised last year by the New Zealand government in their honours, and has been awarded, and he was knighted. He is now a Sir. So, as I say, what an awesome leader he is.
Oh, well, so he's a legend in its own right there, Kevin, but he's gone on to bigger and better things now, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what we want the conference to demonstrate is that everybody can become the leader of their own life. Many people with disability just think they have to follow people who tell them what to do. Robert's a great example of somebody who said, no, I'm not going to follow, I'm going to lead. And he started leading his own life, and now he leads the way for others. And that's what the conference does. It provides that opportunity for people to actually learn from others and to see that they don't have to live in the shadow of other people. They can, let their own light shine and get out there and actually change the world, which is what self-advocacy is all about.
So I know that Doug was in that sort of same situation, that he wanted all institutions to be closed, and I think it's a good thing that Robert was doing that.
Well, Doug actually turned the light on for me.
Oh, no, not for you, no, I mean for Robert.
Yeah, Robert turned, Robert's fantastic. But what I was meaning to say was that Doug lit up the world in his own way, and he inspired, Doug Pentland inspired lots and lots of people across Australia, including me. I'll never forget listening to Doug speak the first time, and up until then I hadn't really understood the importance of self-advocacy, and it was Doug who he persuaded me very quickly that it's the only way forward, and he was an incredible leader. I'm sure you guys miss him. I'm sure we all do.
We all do, actually. We all do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does the NDIS fund people to attend the conference?
Yeah. The NDIS doesn't actually pay for people to come to the conference. It doesn't pay for their registration.
No, it doesn't.
Which, and I have to say, the registration is not a lot. It's a pretty cheap conference. But the NDIS, if you are an NDIS participant and you put it into your plan, they can pay staff to support you at the conference, to travel, and participate at the conference. A lot of people, need support to get there and attend and care, etc. So, and that funding can come from your core supports budget. If you know the NDIS lingo, if you in your plan you ask for that support to be there, they can put that into your core supports, and they can they can help staff to get there. If you need other costs like for accommodation and registration and transport, you can ask your planner for capacity building support or funding, and you can still get that through the NDIS as well. You just and if anyone's got any questions about that, they can always contact us, and we've got information on what they need to tell their planner. Okay.
And most of the organisations down there that we've seen that we did have the NDIS sponsor some of the groups that were there.
Yeah, look, and it's really interesting, Norrie, because I was worried about 4 or 5 years ago that most of the people who were coming to the conference were coming because their organisations were supporting them to come. And I was worried that with the change to the NDIS, maybe it would be harder for individuals to get support to come. But in fact, the fact that we had 1,300 people, I think what we're seeing is that people have worked out. They love the conference so much they are talking about it in their plans, and we are seeing people accessing the NDIS support. So if that's true, then I think the conference is going to get bigger and bigger every year because there are lots and lots of people who are finding out about it.
Yeah, and I reckon it will get bigger and bigger and better every year. I reckon. Yeah,
well, let's hope that continues to succeed. I mean, the dance. I think James. I think mentioned before. The dinner disco. I mean, just 650 people on the dance floor and that band. It's pretty bloody awesome. And and I think people, as people start to hear about just how much fun it is, more and more people want to be part of it. So. And it's not just the fun; it's the participating in those very important discussions about the NDIS, about public transport, about the disability support pension, about employment. It's all those important discussions, and people are starting to realise that the conference is a way where they can talk directly to the decision makers, because the decision makers come along too. They're sitting quietly in the room a lot of the times. They come to the dinner. So the people from the NDIS, the government, TAC, all sorts of people come along, and it gives them the opportunity to hear directly from people with disability about the problems that they need support for. So, it's working pretty well.
Oh, that's good. We're going to go into a music break now, and we'll come back and have something more.
It's deadly. Have you heard? I'm as free as a bird.
Listen to us, brothers, sisters, listen well. Hear our voices making better choices so we can tell. Our fellow humans don't judge our disability. Listen, look, learn about our ability. All shapes and sizes, all colors in between. We are one, we are made it, we just want to be seen. Every now and then I think, yesterday we were stolen. Even though we had ID, today we walk free.
If together we can walk, then together we can talk. You can understand us, and you can be around us. Cause we don't bite,
Deadly.
so no need for stage fright.
Deadly.
We just want to be free, we're not afraid of ID.
Deadly.
Me and my mates tossed around inside, we didn't have a key. There was no we could hide, now that's our legacy. Walked away from the cells, walked away from the abuse, and institutions where I held, there was no excuse.
So we have to fight, to have the right, to lead our life, just to live. There was time to forgive. So,
Yeah, now come on, a steady, hey, brothers and sisters are deadly. Now let's look to the future, let's all mend our sutures, and welcome us to your community, and celebrate unity. Let's show the way to a brighter day.
now we can walk a new road, hand in hand, to protect our beautiful land, and to be free to eternity, honoring who we are and our identity. I'm proud to be Aborigine, and also I'm proud to be ID.
If together we can walk, then together we can talk. You can understand us, and you can be around us. Cause we free. We're not afraid of ID.
Deadly! Deadly!
You're listening to 3CR's Community Radio, and you're listening to Raising Our Voices. And our special guest today, we're talking with Kevin Stone, the CEO of Valid for Valid. And there's one more question. Where can people find out more information about Valid and at having a say conference?
Okay. So people who are on the internet can find our website. It's www.valid.org.au. And you can go to the website and then follow that. There's a link to our conference, Having a Say. There's also information about all the things that we do. Or they can just give us a call and we can send stuff if they're not on the internet. Just give us a call and we give lots of information to people. Valid supports a whole lot of peer action groups around Victoria, and people can find out about them off the website too, but they give people an opportunity to come along and participate in all sorts of discussions. We've got peer support groups around for people who are NDIS participants, so that's for people to talk about how their plans are working and that sort of stuff. We've got one peer support group for parents of people who have behaviours of concern, and that gives families opportunities to talk through, how they're going about getting a better deal for their sons and daughters. We've got self-advocacy groups or networks that we support across Melbourne, large self-advocacy networks. We have bi-monthly meetings and get 100 or so people to each of those meetings.
Tell us more.
And those people are mainly people with disability coming from all sorts of services across Melbourne in particular. So there are other ways people can get information about what we're doing. We have expos, like today actually, as we're speaking, where there's an expo that Valid's running down in Sale. So at the Having a Say conference last week, we had our big Our Choice Expo, had about 100 exhibitors in addition to the conference. But we're doing that throughout the year. We run those expos right through country Victoria as well, making sure that people with disability and families are aware of the choices that are available to them, and giving them information and support to make sure they're choosing good providers and getting good deals. So Valid's pretty active out there, we'll do anything we can to make sure people get their rights respected.
What we're planning to do for next year is reinforce putting together. We're just planning it up now. We've started going to get a banner, and we're going to get bigger and better. We're going to have T-shirts and pamphlets and what have you. So we're going to be huge for next year's Having a Say conference.
Oh, that's great, mate. And anything we can do to help you, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, no, we'd love to see that.
Kevin, tell us more about some of the activities of the conference.
Well, for me, there are always a number of highlights, okay? And there are all sorts of highlights, particularly, I'll tell you about this highlight. It actually didn't happen at the conference. It happened on the Wednesday night at about 10:30. I was sitting at home after the conference recovering, and I get this email from a stranger. Her name was Ruth. I don't know the woman, but she got my email address off the website, I think, and she was writing to tell me. She said that she and her husband were travelling back from Geelong to Melbourne on the train at 3:27 that afternoon. And on the train was this young man who was blind and had other disabilities, who was raving the whole time about his life being changed by going to the conference. And he just kept saying it was awesome. And he asked his permission to talk with them about it. And she said by the end of the rail journey, this guy had managed to change their lives because he'd given them an insight into the issues that he was facing. But for me, that's one of the most amazing, highlights of the conference. It does change people's lives. The other big highlight for me was the advocacy dinner on the Tuesday night. As I said, 650 people on the dance floor is hard to beat. The band's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah.
At the same time, in another
actually.
room, there's 100 or so people who were in the advocacy dinner, a more quiet, sedate sort of room, listening to a guest speaker. And the guest speaker was Mary Mallett, who's the CEO of the Disability Advocacy Network of Australia, DANA. And Mary was just stunning, just sensational. She talked about the importance of advocacy and self-advocacy, the importance of making sure that people's voices were being heard by government, making sure that advocacy and self-advocacy is properly funded. And unless it is, then the vision of the NDIS is not going to be fulfilled. And so she talked, pretty passionately, and for about half an hour, 40 minutes. We learnt so much from that, but we all came out of that experience understanding that we've got a big job ahead of us as a sector. We've got the NDIS that's happening, and that's great, but Mary's dead right that unless advocacy and self-advocacy are funded properly and are a big part of it, then the NDIS is going to be dominated by bureaucrats and service providers and others, and they'll tell people with disability what their choices are. They'll tell them what they should think and what they should choose. And for people with intellectual disability in particular, self-advocacy needs to be funded properly so that people with disability can make those choices for themselves. Unless it's done properly, unless it's funded properly, then they'll remain captive and silent, and we'll have lost an opportunity to get a much better disability system because of it. So, the conferences, I guess in those two highlights, the dinner, the fun on the disco, but then the depth and the strength of its messages. That's what the conference is about. It's fun, but it's bloody meaningful, and it's powerful, and that's what we need.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thanks.
Okay, we're just about out of time, so we'd like to thank for your time there, Kevin, and we're just going to have to wrap it up. So tune in next month for Raising Our Voices on 8:55 a.m.
Thank you.
So thanks for your time, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
No, thanks for the opportunity, guys. See you next year, eh? Or see you sooner than that, hopefully. Yeah.
Tune in next month to Raising Our Voices at 3CR on 8:55 a.m.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.